Welcome to SSUC, to Southminster Steinhauer United Church, where we are all spiritual seekers united in community on this life's journey we're all on. We are all here part of a community that at first might seem strange. We don't do and say some things you might expect in a church. We focus on what it means to be our best selves, how we can individually and together live deeply, express compassion and care, work for justice, make a difference in our lives and in the world. And so then this is not so strange a place after all. It's familiar. It is who we are and who we're becoming. It's a community of people who do their best to say what they mean and to mean what they say. So welcome to this community this morning. You're welcome just as you are. We all try to build a safer place here for all people, all sizes, all ages, all colors, all genders, all sexualities, all abilities, all religions, or none, or all. For those of us that have been here regularly all summer, welcome. For those of us that return after some time away, welcome home. For all of us, whether we're here the first time or the first time in a while, we're welcome and we're invited into this place that we might find what we need at whatever pace we need it. Welcome. It's in this spirit of welcome that we honor the land that we find ourselves apart. Edmonton, Amiskwaciy-Waskagan, Treaty 6 territory, home. When we gather here, we acknowledge and respect the history, languages, traditions, cultures of diverse Indigenous peoples who have all called this place home. The legacy and teaching that we can learn from them, and the gratitude we have to live and work and make our homes on this land. As our connection to the land and to the First Peoples continues to enrich us, we make this acknowledgement as a symbol of the commitment we make in all of our lives and as a community, to the continued work of reconciliation, to good relationships, to our partnership together. We have an opportunity to share some of the things that are upcoming in the life and the work of this community, and I want to share a few of those with us, and then I know a few of you have some things to share. As always, we offer a gratitude moment for all of you who support and give your time, your energy, and all the ways that you give to this community. We thank you for that. Without you, nothing that we do here in this community would be possible. So thank you for all the ways you contribute. If you would like to contribute today, there are boxes at the back doors that could receive your envelopes that would help us support the work that we do and the energy and time that we give not only to our own programming, but to those things through mission and service that we support around the world. It is now time to move from all of the talking and all of the business of getting here and catching up with each other to an act of being here. And nothing can do that more than a bit of singing and a bit of putting our intentions into this space with each other. So let's sing with one another and focus our attention on being here fully in this moment with each other, deep in our hearts.
A new day comes, bringing shadows of what has gone before. Shadows of grief and grievances and grudges, shades of shames and blames, bearing the light of forgiveness and restoration, bringing the light of possibilities and potential. We light this candle in honor of a new day, a new beginning, a symbol of our intention in ways to live that seek the light of goodness and the light of truth, the light of love, in ways that honor the light in one another. It's a new day, a day of starting over, letting go, opening up to light and warmth, an opportunity to strengthen our intentions, to live well in its light. An act of doing that is to pray, which is a fancy word to say, to focus our intentions on the ways that we would hope we would live and all would live. And so we offer these words with that hope as our prayer this day. We embrace with gratitude the gift of life, the mystery of being, and the richness of diversity. In this time together, may we strengthen our intentions to bring healing to hurt, peace to violence, beauty to ugliness, and love where there is fear and hatred. May we find the grace to accept ourselves, affirm each other, and work together for a more compassionate world. We pray as those born of love and endless light. May it be so.
Would anyone like to join Rhea and come to the carpet for a story? Everyone's welcome. No matter your age, we all love a story. Bless. Okay. I brought it. Might not be the exact book, but I had this book when I was very small, and it was one of my favorites, and I thought I would share it with you. I think you know who this guy is. It's cute, lovable, furry old Grover, right? This is called The Monster at the End of This Book. Do you know this story? You do? That's good. Okay. Well, we start at the beginning, and it says, The Monster at the End of This Book by John Stone, illustrated by Michael Smolin, a Golden Book, New York, copyright 1971 by Sesame Workshop. There's all these words, and then Grover is at the bottom and says, this is a very dull page. What is on the next page? What did that say? On the first page, what did that say? Did that say there will be a monster at the end of this book? It did? Oh, I'm so scared of monsters. Shh. Listen, I have an idea. If you do not turn any pages, we will never get to the end of this book. And that is good because there's a monster at the end of this book. So please do not turn the page. Should I put it away? No? Do you want to see? Yeah. But Grover said not to. Turn the page, okay? You turned the page! Maybe you do not understand. You see, turning pages will bring us to the end of this book, and there is a monster at the end of this book. But this will stop you from turning the pages. See? I'm tying the pages so you cannot... You turned another page! You do not know what you're doing to me. Now, stop turning pages. Should we stop? No. 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 Okay, Grover's got another idea. There. I, Grover, am nailing this page to the next one so that you will not be able to turn it, and we will not get any closer to the monster at the end of this book. Yeah? But he nailed it shut. Oh, all right. Do you know that every time you turn another page, you not only get us closer to the monster at the end of this book, but you make a terrible mess? Okay, this will stop you. A heavy, thick, solid, strong brick wall. I would just like to see you try to turn this page. It's heavy. Oh, look at the pile of bricks. Do you know... Look at him. Do you know that you are very strong, says Grover. Okay, the next page is the end of this book. And there is a monster at the end of this book. Oh, I'm so scared. Please, do not turn the page. Please, please, please. Okay, I'll turn it. Well, look at that. This is the end of the book, and the only one here is me. I, lovable furry old Grover, am the monster at the end of this book. And you were so scared. No, you weren't. I told you and told you and told you there was nothing to be afraid of. Oh, dear. I'm so embarrassed, says Grover. Oh, my goodness. Why is that such a fun book? I love that. Okay, so this was a silly thing because Grover was scared of the monster, and the monster was him. He didn't know that. But can I just say that we all have things we're scared of? And sometimes they make sense, and sometimes they don't. We're all scared of something. And I thought maybe I would start, I'd start with the big kids first, over there in these chairs. And I would ask them a question, and then maybe you'll have an answer too. I want to ask them what things in their lives are scary or maybe are unusual or things that are a bit frightening that they don't know about. Does anyone have something? Oh, scared of talking in front of people. Yeah. Anyone else have something that's scary? Oh, yeah, to have a crash with your car. Be scary. Okay. We're going there. Some people can be scary. Anyone down here? Anyone here? What's something that's a bit scary? Going up and down. Yeah. On the roller coaster. What's something that's scary? Tarantulas. Big spiders. My goodness, that is scary. Yeah. Okay. Okay, Asha. There are things that scare all of us, whether we're kids or grown-ups. There are always scary things in life. But I want to share something that I think Grover teaches us a little bit. When we're with caring and loving people, like our families, and when we have something inside of us that we all have, you can't see it, but there's something in us we all have. It's something strong, something that gives us great courage. Like when we take a breath and we can feel in us some strength inside of us. And when we know that that's there, then even the scary things, we can manage, and they can be okay when we have people that care about us and when we know that we have in us strength and courage, that those scary things can be okay. And pretty soon, we have the courage to turn the next page in our life. We have the courage to do what we need to do. And before you know it, we're like Grover, and we realize, oh, wait a minute. That was pretty scary, but not as scary as I thought. Because we have each other, and we have courage and strength in us. So, thanks for sharing the monster at the end of this book with me. I want to invite you, there's activity tables, you've already been there, there's books, there's the playroom. You're welcome to do whatever you want to do or to continue to your chairs. Okay? Our first piece of wisdom comes from the poet Mark Nepo, from a piece entitled Being a Pilgrim. And although the piece is longer than what you see before you, it begins this way, and I want to invite us all to share in the first part of this reading by reading it together. And then I'll continue with the rest of Mark's words. To journey without being changed is to be a nomad. To change without journeying is to be a chameleon. To journey and be transformed by the journey is to be a pilgrim. We all start out as pilgrims, wanting to journey and hoping to be transformed by that journey. But just as it's impossible when listening to an orchestra to hear the whole of the symphony for very long before we're drawn to hear maybe the piano or the violin, in just this way, our attention to life slips and we experience people and places without being affected by their wholeness. and sometimes feeling isolated and unsure, we change or hide what lives within in order to please or avoid others. The value of this insight is not to use it to judge or berate ourselves, but to help one another see that integrity is an unending process of letting our inner experience and our outer experience complete each other, in spite of our very human lapses. I understand these things so well because I violate them so often. Yet I, as you, consider myself a pilgrim of the deepest kind, journeying beyond any one creed or tradition into the compelling, recurring space in which we know the moment and are changed by it. Mysteriously, as elusive as it is, this moment, where the eye is what it sees, where the heart is what it feels, this moment shows us that what is real is sacred. In the words of this poet, may we find wisdom for our living.
I want to share a story that comes from the end of Luke's Gospel. It's not a story we typically hear in the middle of the summer. It's a story we usually hear a Sunday or two after Easter. It's a story that only comes in Luke's Gospel, isn't found anywhere else in the collection of writings we have, in the stories we have of the Jesus tradition. And this is a story of a journey. On the same day that women had gone to the tomb and found the body of Jesus missing, others who had been part of the community of Jesus were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they were talking with each other about the things that had happened. And while they were talking with one another, someone came and went with them, but their eyes didn't recognize the familiar. They saw only a stranger. And he said to them, "What are you talking about with each other as you walk along?" And they stood still, looking sad. And one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered the stranger, and he said, "Are you the only one in Jerusalem who doesn't know what's happened in these days?" And he asked them, "What things?" And they went on to tell him about how their leader and teacher had been executed by the empire, and how his followers couldn't find his body. And then the story continues. As they came near to the village they were going, he walked ahead of them as if he were going further. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it's almost evening and the day is nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. And when he was at table with them, he took bread and he blessed it and he broke it and he gave it to them. And their eyes were opened and they recognized him. And then he disappeared from their sight. In the words of this first-century storyteller, "May we find wisdom for our When I look around this circle this morning, I keep hearing my mother's voice in my head. I hear her saying, "Ooh, you are a sight for sore eyes." And I think it's a compliment, right? It's a very strange saying, but it's that wonderful sense of how good it is to see community and to be together again. We've traveled more than 32,000 kilometers since we saw you last. We've been privileged to travel by air and rail and road and river. We've been fortunate enough to travel on planes and cars and hydrofoil, and we've spent days on trains and on horseback, and we've logged a lot of new miles on our feet. And we've been touched by the countryside of Germany, the amazing cities of Erfurt and Berlin and St. Petersburg and Moscow and Irkutsk and Ulan Ude and Ulan Batar and Beijing, and the taiga forest and Siberia's deepest freshwater lake. And we've experienced the wonder and the wilderness and the remoteness of the Altai Mountains, where China and Russia and Mongolia come together. And we've camped on the Mongolian steppe. And we've received the hospitality and the help of countless people we will probably never see again. We've been confused, lost, frustrated, overwhelmed, delighted, surprised, challenged, fascinated, and amazed. In the midst of languages we don't speak, alphabets we can't read, customs we don't know, storied lands that have seen so much upheaval in their geology and in their human histories, and we've glimpsed cultures and religious practices and amazing architecture that has shaped identities. And amid all that uniqueness has been the strangely familiar. We've been welcomed into the home of others, a young entrepreneurial couple in Germany, a remarkable Russian host in a Soviet-era apartment in St. Petersburg, in a tiny family-operated traditional courtyard inn in a Hutong neighborhood in Beijing. We've made home in a train compartment crossing Siberia, and in nomadic ger camps, and in a tiny tent you couldn't stand up in, oh, for so many nights. And we've been challenged to find food on menus where you couldn't read a word, or in grocery stores where you couldn't read a label. And to figure out money that had way too many zeros for any reasonable math. And we've been challenged to navigate transit and maps and streets. And always, there were those who would do what they could to help us. Those who would make a stranger feel a little less disoriented and unfamiliar. We completed a kind of circle of our globe, traveling eastward from here to Europe and returning westward home from Asia. A journey that kept immersing us in strangeness, in newness, that again and again miraculously became familiar. That somehow within a day, each new place became familiar. It became the familiar neighborhood to return home to each night, the familiar face of a host, the familiar routine of a day, on the train or on the trail. The strange food that came to be recognized as familiar. It was a journey that kept changing the strange into a form of familiar. Again and again, we would see a face that reminded us of someone we knew in our lives. We would be amazed that what was totally foreign to us when we arrived and stepped off of a train or a plane became knowable and familiar. We all travel, whether we ever leave the place we call home. We're always traveling through time and space, traveling through ages and stages, traveling through seasons and situations in our lives, traveling through beginnings and endings. We're always traveling in ever-widening circles as a planetary species. Maybe that's why our literature is so full of stories of journeys that take our characters into the woods, or along a yellow brick road, or through a bedroom wardrobe, or through platform 9 3/4. From Little Red Riding Hood or Dorothy in Kansas or Harry Potter, we create characters who instruct us in the art of pilgrimage so that we don't just spend our lives traveling. And in the collection of ancient writings we call the Bible, we have this huge repertoire of pilgrims' tales. We could go through it from Genesis to Revelation. Stories of travelers who become pilgrims. And even most of the stories we have of Jesus of Nazareth are stories set in an itinerant life. Stories that are told on the road. Stories that are told in the villages around the Galilee. Stories of a band of peasants who make their life on the road with their teacher. And that story I shared just a moment ago, a story that ends Luke's gospel, is a great parable of pilgrimage. It's not what it sounds like. It's not a ghost story. And it's not a story about a dead man walking and talking and eating. It's a parable, a teaching story, a story to instruct a grieving community in the art of living again, in the art of going on after loss. In the world of that ancient story, Emmaus is an imaginary village 7 miles from Jerusalem. And those who first heard this story would know it was a teaching story because they knew there was no Emmaus. It's a village no one ever heard of, a village that scholars and archaeologists have never been able to identify, a village that's mentioned nowhere else in the Bible because it's a village that never existed. John Dominic Crossan, contemporary New Testament scholar, said, Emmaus is nowhere because Emmaus is everywhere. And Emmaus is a story that never happened because it's a story that's always happening. It's a parable. A story that tells us the truth of our human experience, not a story that relates an experience in human history. So in the story, 2 friends, immersed in their grief, are trying to avoid the pain of seeing the world go on as though nothing had happened. So they're walking from the city that just broke their hearts toward the simplicity of a fictitious village life. And they speak to each other about their pain, about the death they've witnessed, and the rumors of their teacher's missing body. And as they speak, footsteps approach from behind them, and a stranger intrudes into their private grief. And it takes too much effort to try to explain your broken hope. Impatiently, Cleopas, one of the travelers, says to the intruder, "You must be a stranger. You got to be the only one who doesn't know the terrible and tragic things that have happened in Jerusalem this week. It's an experience we've all had. We've had it with a cashier or a driver. Some stranger we encounter who has no idea of the meteor that just struck our lives. They're inhabiting a different world than we're in. But in this story, that stranger becomes a sensitive listener and invites them to share their grief and to tell their story and to talk about the reality they've left the city to escape. And the floodgates of pain open. And the beloved face is named. And the anger toward the enemy who executed him. And the echo of their great and disappointed hope for Jesus. Their anger at their friend who had died and his failure to be the Messiah they had hoped for, and their utter confusion at the irrational news that his body couldn't be found. And the stranger places that story in the midst of all that's sacred to them, and a compelling pattern begins to emerge. And when they come close to their destination, the stranger appears to be going further, and they urge him to stay. And they sit with one another around a table, and the conversation continues. Following the deepest intuition of all our grieving, they're seeking to find meaning in the midst of all that's happening. With simple deliberation, the stranger takes a piece of bread, and he blesses it, and he shares it. And one ordinary moment follows the next. And that deceptive simplicity takes on a shattering significance. Because it's next to impossible to share a table with someone and remain anonymous. When we eat together, we become known. The stranger becomes strangely familiar. The strange food becomes known, and then there's a moment of profound knowing. Some brief moment of recognition, some flicker of knowing that however and whenever we meet one another, whether it's in our deepest pain or our profoundest joy or our genuine wonder or our real hope, but we meet one another with authenticity and vulnerability, sharing our stories, sharing a meal. Somehow our common humanity is exposed. And those shared hopes and dreams and longings connect us. And we're no longer separate and strange to one another. We're together in the miracle and the mystery of living. And for a moment or for a lifetime, strangeness dissolves into a familiarity that unites us. Because we're hungry for the same things, and we're thirsty for the same things, and a smile is the same in every language. The heart has a great capacity for recognition. It has the capacity to recognize itself in another. It has the capacity to recognize truth and goodness. It has the capacity to transcend the particular and touch the universal. It has the capacity to be changed by all that. Come this time next week, it'll be 16 years since we all began a journey with one another. A relationship of strangers becoming family to one another, sharing questions and fears and hopes and concerns and convictions with each other. The very first day I walked through this door on August 11th, 2003, I walked through these doors to share the life of this community, and you planned a welcome for me with a meal. It was a surprise potluck. I was surprised that you thought it was my birthday. And you were surprised that it wasn't. I was surprised by your great arrival in large numbers at lunchtime in the small hall, and you were surprised that I had someplace else I had to be that day. But you waited for me, as you have many times, and invited me to come late to the table, a place of meeting, a place for questions, a place for discovery, a place for relationship, a place for the face of a stranger to become a heart that's deeply familiar to us. And as I reflect on these 16 years we have journeyed together, I can confidently say that for me, it's been a pilgrimage. I've been changed by where we've been together. I've been changed by what we've seen together. I've been changed by those who've been at our table who are no longer here. I've been changed by those who have stayed at the table. And I've been changed by those who've joined this table in various chapters of our lives. I've been changed by the laughter and the tears we've shared. I've been changed by the lives we've blessed in rituals of welcome, and the lives we've celebrated who've gone before us into death. I've been changed by the relationships we've blessed in marriage. I'm asking different questions. I'm finding inspiration in old and new places. And I'm not sure there's more we can ask of any journey than this, than that we are changed by it. So this is a day to celebrate not only the open road, but also the roadside tables that we find along the way. It's a day to celebrate strangers who become beloved companions, sharing our journey and deepening our sense of pilgrimage. And it's a time to consider how we're traveling together, whether we're simply visiting this world, whether life is passing without our attention and our intention, or whether we are pilgrims, becoming changed by all that we see and know, open to the strange becoming strangely familiar. We are creatures of ritual, shaping our days with habits, our seasons with celebrations, our milestones with ceremonies. And we come to this table to frame a moment of ritual, to do what art does, to make the familiar strange and the strange familiar, to turn the most ordinary of elements into symbols, to see in bread a sign of our connection to the earth and each other, to see in juice a symbol of our common life, as though life is shared from a single source.
We stand now at this table. We will soon be invited to be around this table, to frame a moment at a table where strangers become family to one another, in a place where we meet one another in the stories that have shaped us, in the songs that carry our hopes and fears, and in the beauty we bring to each other and create in the world, and in the grief that we share for our planet.
And so we come to this table and pause and hold a simple piece of bread. So ordinary, so common, so familiar. And we pause in that moment in gratitude for the gifts of a good earth that is broken open again and again to feed us. We hold in that piece of bread the work of so many to plant and grow and harvest and grind and bake. The work of the earth in so many to feed our hunger. And as we share bread, we seek to strengthen our commitment to live gratefully and generously.
And then after we receive that bread, there will be a cup before us. And we pause in this moment to share it. That frames a moment of gratitude for the gifts of community. For the communities that are containers for our tears and our joys. For our fears and our hopes. To a place where we're invited to pour ourselves out for each other and for the world. And to share this cup as a commitment to live consciously and intentionally.
The invitation is to honor this table time in whatever way is meaningful for you. We're all welcome to come to the table and share a simple piece of bread and dip it into the cup. Or we're welcome to, if we choose, to remain where we are in reflection. This ritual isn't about expressing beliefs, it's about sharing intentions. Sharing the bread of gladness we taste in moments. And sharing a common cup, which says that no grief or sadness is private property. We share together the sadness we all carry. So we come, welcome to a piece of bread and a cup, that they might speak to us of bread for our journey and the cup of community we share in that meaning-making journey. When you're ready, be welcome. Come and use this time in whatever way is most helpful to you. For those who would appreciate a gluten-free environment, Sherry Ann is standing in the center of the table with the things you need. Sustained by the songs we've sung and the prayers we've shared and the thoughts we've given our minds to and the convictions that have taken up residence in our hearts. We go from this time and place to be light in our world, to make of ourselves a light, to transform the strange into the familiar by loving it into all that it can be and being changed by it. And so we travel on.